Hey guys, Matt here from Wheels Through Time. Always exciting days here at the museum. Today, incredibly special guest. This is Al Payne, grandson of Albert Tachi, and your uncle was
Yep.
Torillo
Ciao.
Tachi,
Yep.
former owners of the Traub motorcycle, guys. So right here, a direct descendant from one of the very few owners in this motorcycle's 105 now, 106-year-old history. So these guys came in today. I was in back wrenching on a transmission. Andy came and got me and told me they were here, and just incredibly exciting. Now, for those of you guys that may not have heard about the Traub motorcycle, one-of-a-kind machine, absolutely hand-built, and its origins for many years were absolutely unknown. So this bike was actually found in the 1960s behind a wall in a Chicago residential building, again with no clue to its origin. So the bike we date to about a mid-teens, 1915, 16, 17 era motorcycle, but yet nothing was really known about the bike. So over many years since you guys have owned it, there's been some things come to light. But what I wanted to talk with you guys about was Al here, and a little bit about his own memories of this motorcycle. So where's it start for you with this bike?
It started with me because we owned the motorcycle shop, Midwest Motorcycles, in Chicago, and
Largest import dealer in the country, right?
Yes. And my grandfather had a dozen antique bikes and bought them and restored them, and this was one of them. So I was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, growing up in a shop, and my job was, hey, clean the bikes, polish them off, do this, do that, and that's what I remember about this. And when certain weekends I was with them, they would all take these bikes out on rides on a Saturday or a Sunday. They would bring this out, a Benelli we had, a 1901 Merkel we had. So these used to come out and run quite often, or they would take them to shows.
Wow.
So that's when I grew up. But
you remember seeing this thing motivate down the road?
Yes.
Oh man, what's really cool about that is one of the previous owners always claimed that he was the first guy to get it going. And that amazing.
And just recently, unfortunately, my uncle just passed away less than a year ago, and there was one more story he told me about the bike, and I got bits and pieces that they actually had this running, and he raced somebody kind of in Soldiers Field in Chicago.
In Soldier Field, that's where the Bears play.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
So I don't know how true, because he was starting to get sick, but it was one of the last things he was telling me about the bike.
But you do know that the motorcycle was run, and saw it run as a kid.
I've seen it run. I used to be in, I have a 1937 Moto Guzzi sidecar, and my grandmother was in the sidecar, and I was a little child sitting in that sidecar while my grandfather was driving it, and my uncle was driving this, going down the road. I remember that.
What a memory.
So it was neat
unreal.
to come see it again.
Very,
over those years.
It's just too neat, and I can't imagine what it would have been like seeing something like this at such a young age. Nowadays we've got a whole different perspective as to the bike's history, but you grew up in old motorcycles. You grew up in new motorcycles.
When I was that young, you didn't really appreciate it as much. Yeah, it's a motorcycle. It's cool. You didn't really, at that time I didn't know what this was. That's another motorcycle, another antique, whatnot. But the true hit, as I got older, and you guys got it and I started doing it. I'm like, wow, that was really a neat piece of history.
Piece of history
that we owned.
Just very cool. So tell me a little bit about your family history. You mentioned that your grandfather and your uncle owned Midwest Motorcycle Imports. They were also motorcycle racers.
Oh yes. My grandfather, they both raced at Daytona. He was 68 years old, still racing a 125 Suzuki road racing at 68 years old.
68 years
old. And
so
was my uncle.
Your uncle also.
Yes.
So your uncle was highly competitive at Daytona. He raced the 200. Is that right?
Oh yeah.
Wow. So these guys are going as fast as they can go. 1960s, 70s.
Well, back then, his last bike that he raced, like I was telling you earlier, was a Suzuki 750, what they call a water buffalo. It was a 3-cylinder, two-stroke, and it was mounted on a Norton Manx.
Like a featherbed chassis.
Right, exactly. And he built his own dyno, and I remember as a kid in the shop, because I used to get in trouble being in there when I shouldn't have been. And he says that thing would turn 15,000 RPMs on a dyno.
15,000 RPMs.
15,000 RPMs on the dyno.
That's
And he
incredible.
says, it won't last, but it will do it.
It'll
and
do it.
that was the bike he raced, and at that time, 170, 180 was quick. Today, that's standard. That's slow.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I guess you'd have been young, but do you have any? Did you ever catch up with any stories exactly on how these guys acquired this from the original family?
Well, it pretty much was how you guys tell it. It was how I was told from my uncle and my aunt that when they were alive, it was two Polish plumbers, and they were demoing a building, taking it apart, and that's how they found this.
Found the bike,
right?
And they brought it to you
and then
guys.
they brought it to us, and my grandfather ended up trading. I couldn't tell you exactly what, but they traded him a Suzuki for this bike, so it was kind of like an even trade.
Yeah, sure.
Type of deal.
I've been saying Yamaha all these years. So
yeah,
it's a Suzuki.
No, it was a Suzuki.
Okay,
yeah, it was.
Suzuki.
Well, I can't verify that either. We owned a Suzuki shop, but we had other bikes
Sure.
too. But our primary was a Suzuki.
Yeah, right.
Shop. So,
Wow, you would know better than me.
so I believe it was probably a Suzuki on that one, but there's nobody to ask anymore at that point. But so it was traded, and we've had it ever since then.
Had it ever since then
until about 1979, 80 when we sold the shop.
When you guys sold the shop, and now I always heard it was Eakins that came and bought the bike from you guys. You said your grandfather and uncle were friends with Bud Eakins?
With Steve McQueen too.
Steve McQueen.
Yes. He used to buy a lot of the Indians from my grandfather after he restored them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, you telling me a story about him. He used to go and eat at your
Yep, he used to come over and eat dinner over there at the house. So
way cool, man. Unbelievable.
Yeah, so there's a lot of neat stories about that. I mean, unfortunately, like I said, I was young, so to really appreciate it was kind of hard back then, but I really appreciate it now.
Sure.
What it was. I mean, just a neat experience.
Oh, totally amazing. Yeah, and so Eakins got the bike off of these guys. Well, I believe when he was on set for Blues Brothers, probably McQueen introduced Eakins to your family, and Bud brought the bike back to California. And they say Bud never ran it, but Richard ran it, and went inside of the engine and maybe repaired some of the stuff that was worn over the years that Traub and that you guys might have been riding it. So, you got any old photos of this? You got any?
I do. I probably got maybe another half a dozen to a dozen, black photos from when we originally got it sitting in the shop and sitting in display at the motorcycle shop with numerous. I do remember next to the Merkel, next to that. I have those, and I'll send them to you.
Oh man, that would be fantastic.
I don't, you can have all of them.
That would be absolutely amazing.
I wanted to stay with the bike because it's just the history and what you guys have done with the bike, as far as preserving it, leaving it like the way it is, and being able to run it so everybody can see it and hear it. That is what it's all about.
That is what it's all about. This is a museum that runs. We will do our best to keep this thing running for years to come. So you got old bikes yourself?
Yes, I drive one of my grandfather's antiques. I got a 1937 Moto Guzzi with a sidecar, which he brought in from Africa in 1942 in pieces during the war. He hid it from the army and took it apart. So then he came to the United States, brought half the motorcycle in pieces. My mother, my grandmother, and aunt still lived in Tunisia, Africa.
Mm-hmm.
In 45, they came to the United States.
Packing parts in their suitcases.
Packing parts, bringing that, and it was reassembled. And it's been in my family ever since. They used to drive it every week in downtown Chicago. I used to, like I said, I was with them all the time. Go to dinner, drive it, and then he put a sidecar on it in 1962, so that made it really special to drive around. And then the very first time I drove it was when I was 16 years old. It was the year he got sick. He taught me how to drive it. And what's weird about that too is the year he taught me to drive it, he had passed away. Okay, my uncle, which is his son, took the bike and put it in his house, and it sat in his house for 35 years in the living room, untouched.
Wow.
Okay. 9 years ago, my uncle called me and says, "Time for you to come get all the bikes. They're yours." And I've been waiting, for that bike because I grew up with it. It's just one of those things. I want it, just because of my grandfather and family history. Brought it home, brought it back from Florida, back to Chicago, cleaned it up. I put gas in it, changed the oil, six kicks of the Kickstarter. It fired right up. After that, to this day, I ride it once a week.
Yeah.
One kick, it fires up.
Unbelievable.
And we'll take it on a 40, 50 mile an hour run.
Unbelievable.
So yeah, so I take it everywhere.
Keeping the family history
That's
alive.
right. That's right.
Too cool. Al, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Yep.
Thanks for filling in some more history on this incredibly rare motorcycle. Guys, history here happens every single day. 106 years later, we're still discovering new things about the Traub motorcycle. It doesn't get any cooler. Thanks for tuning in. We got more great stuff coming to you. Check out wheelsthroughtime.com. Check out our YouTube. Subscribe today. Thanks for tuning in.